The first time Talon Rainwalker saw her, she was standing in the doorway of a weathered cabin, the wind whipping her chestnut hair across her pale face, and he thought the prairie itself had stopped breathing. Winter had arrived early that year, coating the hills with frost, and the sky hung low and gray, like it was holding its own secret. Evelyn Harrow, 30 years old, fiercely independent, with eyes the color of storm clouds, was leaning on the doorframe, one hand gripping the rough wood, the other pressing a scarf against her neck. Talon had been tracking deer through the high pines. When he saw the flicker of firelight behind the cabin, he had never seen a woman alone in these parts. And yet, something in her stance told him she wasn't afraid. But there was worry in her eyes, a quiet, aching kind of worry that made him want to step forward, to shield her from the biting wind and the loneliness that came with it. "Evening," he said, his voice low, carrying the weight of the forest and the wind. He removed his wide-brimmed hat, letting snowflakes tumble off his dark hair. "Evening," she replied, her voice steady, though her hand shook slightly. "You're a long way from anywhere." "And yet, here I am," Talon said, letting a hint of amusement curl around the edges of his tone. "Storm's coming in. Reckon I can't outrun it." Evelyn studied him for a long moment. Her eyes narrowed, as though measuring whether he was danger or sanctuary. Finally, she nodded and opened the cabin door wider. "Then you might as well come in," she said. "There's fire. And supper, if you're willing to share." The cabin smelled of pine and candle smoke, of something faintly herbal lavender, maybe sage trailing from a small bundle on the table. Talon felt a strange sense of intrusion, yet gratitude settled like a warm stone in his chest. She motioned him toward the hearth, where the fire spat sparks into the dim room. "Name's Evelyn," she said, shaking snow from her coat. "I don't usually take in strangers. But the wind—" She trailed off, then looked at him with a mixture of defiance and curiosity. "You Apache, yes?" Talon's eyes darkened, reflecting the firelight. "Aye, Rainwalker, Talon Rainwalker." He removed his gloves and ran a hand through his hair, trying to ease the stiffness from his shoulders. "You're far from home," Evelyn said, keeping her tone neutral. "And I should warn you, I'm not used to company. Most people wouldn't understand." "They wouldn't." "Stay." Her gaze flicked to the fire, to the snow beyond the window, and Talon felt the weight of something unspoken. "Staying isn't always about wanting," Talon said quietly. "Sometimes it's about need." The tension in the room shifted. Evelyn turned her head to him, her lips pressed together, betraying the slightest tremor of vulnerability. For a moment, the wind howling outside and the world beyond the cabin seemed to vanish. Talon saw the hardness of her life etched in her eyes, the days spent alone, the nights spent warding off wolves, the endless cold, but he also saw something softer, a hunger for connection, a longing she dared not name. Evelyn served them both a thin stew, the steam curling in the firelight, and they ate in silence at first. Talon watched the way her fingers lingered on the spoon, the way her eyes scanned the room, always alert, always measuring. She was strong, independent, and yet there was a quiet loneliness in her that spoke to him in a language he understood by the time the fire had burned low. Talon found himself sharing stories of the forests he had roamed, of the rivers and the deer and the stars above the canyons. Evelyn listened, her head tilted slightly, a small smile tugging at her lips as she poured another cup of water. It was rare, this kind of conversation, honest, unguarded. He felt a pull toward her, a current neither of them could name, and the room seemed to shrink until the world beyond the cabin felt impossibly far away. Outside, the wind shrieked against the wooden walls. Inside, the warmth of the fire and the quiet intimacy of shared solitude wrapped around them. Talon didn't know what the night would bring, he only knew that he was exactly where he was meant to be. Evelyn Harrow, the woman in the cabin, had no idea that this storm, this chance encounter, would change both their lives forever. And as the snow piled higher against the windows, Talon felt the stirrings of a desire he had never known before, one that would soon be tested by the secrets Evelyn carried, the one she had never shared with another soul. The wind howled like a living thing, rattling the cabin walls and rattling the bones of anyone foolish enough to stand outside. Talon Rainwalker pressed his back against the rough pine door, listening to the storm claw at the world beyond. Evelyn Harrow stood near the hearth, a blanket draped loosely around her shoulders, eyes flicking nervously toward the windows. "You're not leaving now, are you?" she asked, her voice low, almost afraid. Talon's dark eyes met hers. "Not with this snow." He shifted, feeling the cold seep into his skin despite the fire. "It'll be dangerous. Roads buried, wolves prowling." Evelyn's jaw tightened. "I've managed before. I can manage tonight." But there was a tremor in her tone that betrayed her resolve. The wind's shriek cut through the silence, and even she flinched. Talon stepped closer to the hearth, letting the fire's warmth bathe him. "Sometimes managing isn't enough," he said softly, almost to himself. His gaze swept over her strong hands, the lines of endurance on her face, the firelight dancing in her storm-gray eyes. There was something in her presence that drew him in, a current neither of them had yet named. And he knew that tonight would be different. They ate in near silence, the thin stew barely tasting like food, more like ritual against the dark outside. Talon's hands rested near the fire, muscles tensing and relaxing as he watched Evelyn move. She had a precision in her movements, a control born from solitude and hard living. But there was also a fragility, a longing she would never admit. When the meal was done, Talon rose. "I'll take the floor," he said, not waiting for permission. "It's better than riding the storm out outside." Evelyn blinked, caught off guard. "The bed, it's—" Her voice faltered. She gestured toward a small cot pushed against the far wall. "You don't need—" "I'll manage," he interrupted gently. "I'm used to sleeping rough." "It'll do." The fire crackled, filling the heavy silence. Outside, the wind shrieked like an omen, but inside, the air seemed to thrum with a different energy. Talon noticed the faint scent of lavender and pine in the cabin, the way the shadows flickered across Evelyn's face as she moved to fetch more wood for the fire. Hours passed slowly. Talon lay on the floor near the hearth, listening to the storm and to Evelyn moving about her small home, each creak of the floorboard and sigh of breath carrying weight. He could hear the rhythm of her life, steady but haunted, shaped by years of solitude and the harshness of the land. Finally, she sat beside him, knees drawn up, blanket wrapped tight. "Do you always carry your burdens alone?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. Talon studied her, caught off guard by the intimacy of the question. "I do," he admitted. "Most can't understand what it means to walk between worlds, to carry the past and the present at the same time. But sometimes the weight can be shared." Evelyn's eyes glimmered in the firelight. "And what if it's not safe to share? What if the other person disappears?" He reached out, placing a calloused hand near hers, close enough that their fingers almost brushed. "Then you hold on to the ones who stay," he said softly, "and hope the rest don't matter." The storm outside seemed to ease slightly, as if listening. Talon felt a pull toward her, raw and undeniable, and for a moment he thought about crossing the thin line of propriety, about letting the loneliness and longing of the cabin night guide him. Evelyn's gaze met his, unflinching but tender, and the world shrank to the space between them, a fragile warmth against the cold outside. She leaned back against the wall, firelight highlighting the curve of her jaw, the determination etched in her features. "Talon," she said, a quiver in her voice he didn't expect. There are things I've kept hidden. Things I haven't told anyone." His heart tightened. "Secrets don't always hurt the holder," he said carefully, "but they can weigh heavily on the soul." Evelyn looked at him, her eyes full of storm and shadow. "Then perhaps it's time someone else carries a little of the weight," she whispered, almost afraid of the truth she was about to reveal. Talon said nothing, only watched, knowing that the night ahead would demand more courage than either of them had shown before. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in white. Inside, two solitary souls found themselves on the edge of something they couldn't yet name, an intimacy born of survival. Firelight and the fragile threads of trust and somewhere deep in both their hearts. A question lingered. What desire would be revealed when the storm finally passed? The fire had burned low when Talon finally allowed himself to stretch out on the cabin floor, the warmth seeping into his tired muscles. The storm outside had softened to a relentless whisper, snow piling high against the cabin walls like a quiet fortress. Evelyn Harrow sat on the edge of her small cot, the blanket wrapped tightly around her shoulders, eyes reflecting both firelight and storm-shadowed memories. Talon could feel the weight of the moment, thick and electric, suspended in the flickering shadows. He had spent countless nights under open skies, with wolves and winter winds as his companions, yet this was unlike anything he had known. The presence of another human being, so close and unguarded, made his heart drum in a rhythm he didn't recognize. "You've been carrying it alone for a long time," he said softly, his voice blending with the hiss of the fire. "I can see it in you." Evelyn's lips pressed into a thin line. "Some burdens are safer left alone," she replied, her voice calm but brittle. She hugged her knees closer, as though shielding herself from the world. "Sharing them? It's dangerous." "Dangerous can be worth it," Talon countered, moving slightly closer, the firelight casting shadows across his chiseled shoulders. "Sometimes, carrying alone breaks you more than the world ever could." Her gaze lifted to him, storm-gray eyes sharp but searching. "You talk like you know," she said, almost a whisper. "But how could you? You've lived in tribes in the wild. How could you understand a cabin, a life built on isolation and fear of losing what little you have?" Talon paused, thinking of the forests he had roamed, the rivers he had crossed, and the battles both visible and unseen he had fought. "I know solitude," he said carefully. "I know nights when the cold seeps into your bones and the wind whispers lies to your mind. But even in the wilderness, I've learned that trust, even brief trust, can be as vital as air." Evelyn's eyes glistened, the flickering fire reflecting a depth of emotion she rarely revealed. She took a slow breath, the kind that tasted like relief and fear all at once. "There are things I've wanted, things I've longed for, but never dared to admit." Talon's hand hovered near hers, an unspoken invitation, careful and respectful. "If you speak them," he said, "I'll listen. No judgment. No questions you're not ready to answer." For a long moment she looked away, tracing patterns on the rough wood floor with her finger. "I've spent my life managing this cabin, the land, my reputation, my loneliness. I've kept people at bay because—" her voice faltered, "because I thought my desires were too complicated, too dangerous, too selfish." Talon's gaze softened, his presence steady and grounding. "Desires aren't dangerous," he said. "Hiding them can be. The world doesn't forgive secrets, but it's stronger when we share them with someone who matters." Evelyn's eyes met his again, the flicker of vulnerability deepening into something raw and almost tender. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "I've dreamed of a life different from this, of passion, of being understood, of someone not just surviving alongside me, but feeling with me. The fire crackled, echoing like a heartbeat in the silence. Talon moved closer, careful not to intrude, yet the space between them seemed to shrink with each word. "I don't just survive," he said quietly. "I feel, and I can feel with you. If you'll let me." Evelyn's hand twitched near the edge of her blanket. She didn't pull away. Her voice was barely audible. I've never let anyone see me like this. Not really. Not fully, but there's a part of me that's been waiting." Talon's heart thrummed at the admission, at the fragile trust she placed in him. He extended his hand, not expecting, not demanding, just offering a bridge. She hesitated, then let her fingers brush against his calloused skin. A spark electric and undeniable passed through them, uniting two solitary souls who had long wandered separate worlds. Outside, the wind continued to whisper, indifferent to the intimacy within the cabin. Inside, warmth and tension intertwined, wrapping around them like a fragile cocoon. Two hearts, lonely and wary, had found the first threads of connection. A promise of something neither had dared to imagine until now. And in the quiet moments before sleep, with snow drifting silently against the windows, Evelyn Harrow's desire, unspoken but palpable, lingered between them, waiting for the courage of daylight and the clarity of hearts willing to leap. Morning light filtered weakly through frost-frosted windows, painting the cabin in pale gray and gold. The storm had softened to a gentle wind, but the snow still lay thick against the wooden walls, a silent sentinel guarding the small home. Evelyn Harrow stirred on her cot, blanket drawn tight, and noticed Talon Rainwalker still on the floor, eyes closed, muscles relaxed yet coiled like a panther ready to move. She studied him quietly, drinking in the sight of his powerful frame, the way his long black hair fell in disarray, and the subtle gleam of tribal jewelry catching the morning light. For a moment, she felt a tremor of something she hadn't felt in years, vulnerability, tinged with trust. "Talon," she murmured softly, breaking the silence, "you stayed the night, and yet you didn't." Her voice faltered. "You didn't push. You respected." He opened his eyes, dark and intense, meeting hers with an unreadable expression. "Respect is earned," he said quietly. "And you? You've carried more than anyone should." Evelyn looked away, her gaze drifting to the snow-covered hills beyond the cabin. "It's easier to manage alone," she admitted, "but easier doesn't mean better. Sometimes you realize you've been missing something without even knowing it." Talon moved to the cot, kneeling carefully so as not to crowd her. The warmth from the fire had faded, but the air between them carried a different heat, born of proximity and the unspoken tension that lingered from the previous night. "Missing someone to share it with?" he asked softly. His voice was steady, patient, the kind of voice that coaxed trust out of hiding. Evelyn's fingers clutched the blanket tighter. "Yes, and more than that," she whispered. "Someone who sees you. All of you, even the parts you try to hide. Someone who doesn't flinch at your pain or your desire." Talon's hand hovered near hers, not touching, just waiting. The room seemed to shrink around them, leaving only firelight, quiet, and the faint scent of pine and smoke. "You're not afraid," she said finally, a small, almost defiant smile tugging at her lips. "You're not like everyone else." "I'm not," he replied, the corner of his lips lifting slightly. "But I am drawn to honesty, to courage. And you? You're both, even if you tried to hide it." The silence stretched, intimate and heavy. Evelyn finally let herself relax, lowering her hands and letting the blanket slip slightly from her shoulders. There was a moment of hesitation, as though she were standing at the edge of a cliff, wondering whether the leap would hurt or heal. "I have to tell you something," she said, voice trembling but steady. "Something I've never said aloud to anyone. Not because it's shameful, but because it's mine. And I didn't know. I didn't know if anyone would understand. Talon's dark eyes softened. Try me, he said simply. Evelyn took a deep breath. I've wanted someone to share the night with. To not be alone in the cold, in the dark. Someone who could see me, and I could see them. Not just survive beside each other, but feel, desire, trust. I've imagined it, Talon, but never thought it could be real. The fire cracked behind him, punctuating her words like the world itself had paused to listen. Talon's hand finally moved, resting near hers, fingers brushing the blanket that wrapped her. It can be real, he said quietly, if you let it. Evelyn swallowed, her pulse quickening. And you? Are you saying that you... I've stayed, Talon said, his voice low, resonant. I stayed because I was drawn here. To you. To this. To what could be. I'm not leaving, not now, not while there's a chance to feel this truth between us. Her storm gray eyes glistened, and she allowed a small laugh, shaky but genuine. I never thought someone like you would care, or stay, or understand. Talon tilted his head, dark hair catching the sunlight. I do, and I will. But trust is fragile, Evelyn. You have to let it grow slowly. No rush, no shame, no fear. Just trust. She nodded, feeling a weight lift from her chest, replaced by a cautious hope. The snow outside sparkled under the weak morning sun, and for the first time in years, Evelyn Harrow felt the world could hold warmth beyond the fire. And as they sat together, two solitary souls, the air between them hummed with a promise. A night of survival had turned into a dawn of possibility, and neither could deny the stirrings of desire, curiosity, and trust that now tethered them together. Outside, the prairie stretched cold and endless. Inside, warmth and the fragile beginning of connection breathed life into the cabin walls. And both Evelyn and Talon understood, in that quiet moment, that the storm had passed, but the real tempest of hearts and desire was only beginning. The cabin was quiet, the morning sun slanting through frost-streaked windows, painting streaks of gold across the rough-hewn floor. Talon Rainwalker remained near the hearth, the fire reduced to glowing embers, muscles relaxed yet taut, his dark eyes never leaving Evelyn Harrow. She sat on the edge of the cot, blanket draped loosely, her storm-gray eyes tracing the shadows dancing along the walls. For hours, neither spoke. Words felt unnecessary. The weight of their shared vulnerability hung between them like a fragile thread. Outside, the snow glinted against the hills, silent and unyielding, but inside, the air pulsed with unspoken truths. Evelyn shifted, a faint flush coloring her pale cheeks. I've never let anyone see this side of me, she admitted softly. Not like this, not fully. Talon tilted his head, studying her, sensing the tension in her voice, the tremor beneath her calm exterior. This side? It's the real you, he said quietly. Not the one the world sees, not the one you hide behind. I see it. I don't judge it. I want it. Her breath caught, and for a moment she looked away, caught between fear and longing. I don't know if I'm ready, she whispered, but... Her voice faltered, then steadied. But I want to be. I've spent too long denying myself, denying connection, denying desire. Talon moved closer, careful, deliberate. Then we take it slowly, he said. No rush. Just trust. And honesty. You don't have to do more than you're ready for. She nodded, her gaze returning to his. There was a fire in her eyes now, a storm tempered by hope, and she felt her heart quicken. I've imagined what it might be like to feel wanted, to feel seen, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. And with you, It feels real. Not imagined, real. Talon's hand brushed lightly against hers, their fingers barely touching at first, then intertwining with tentative confidence. The warmth from his skin spread through her like sunlight breaking through a gray sky. Real is what we make it, he said. Not a fantasy. Not a dream. Real. Her pulse raced as she allowed herself to relax against him slightly, the tension in her shoulders melting. I don't know if I can say more, she admitted. Not yet, but I want you to know. Talon's lips curved in a slow, understanding smile. I know, he said. And that's enough. The rest will come in time. The fire crackled behind them, sending sparks that danced like tiny fireflies. Evelyn drew a shaky breath, realizing for the first time in years that she could surrender a part of herself without fear. Talon's presence was grounding, patient, and unwavering, and it made her courage swell. I've lived my life in control, she confessed, but there's a part of me that longs to lose it, to let someone in, completely, to trust without holding back, to desire without fear. Talon's dark eyes softened, reflecting the glow of the embers and the depth of his own desire. Then let it happen, he said quietly. No shame, no restraint, just being with someone who understands. Evelyn's breath caught again, the heat rising in her chest. She had kept her desires buried, disguised as prudence, but Talon had seen past all of it. He was not just patient, he was present. And that presence, steady and unwavering, made her heart ache with longing. For the first time that morning, she reached out, letting her hand rest fully in his. The connection was electric, subtle but undeniable, and she felt the fragile threads of trust and desire knitting together. Outside, the prairie lay cold and silent, but inside, the cabin was alive with warmth, intimacy, and the beginning of surrender. Evelyn's secret longing, her desire to be seen, wanted, and understood, was no longer a private burden. It was shared, acknowledged, and nurtured. Talon leaned just slightly closer, careful to give her space while closing the distance of intent. This night, he said softly, this moment, it's ours. Whatever comes next, it begins here, together. Evelyn nodded, closing her eyes briefly, letting the trust and desire wash over her. Together, she whispered. The world outside remained vast, cold and indifferent, but within the cabin walls, two hearts had found a fragile sanctuary, one that would withstand storms, both of the prairie and of the heart, and as the fire sputtered low, the space between them seemed charged with possibility. Desire long denied had finally been acknowledged, and the first threads of intimacy, emotional and perhaps more, began to weave a tapestry neither could deny. Night fell quickly over the prairie, painting the sky in deep indigo and scattering stars across the frozen expanse. The snow outside had hardened under the frigid air, reflecting the pale moonlight that filtered through the cabin's frost-covered windows. Inside, the warmth of the fire offered sanctuary, but the real heat simmered between Evelyn, Harrow, and Talon, Rainwalker. The day's confessions had left the air taut with anticipation. Evelyn sat on the edge of the cot, blankets slipping from her shoulders, exposing a vulnerable grace she rarely allowed anyone to see. Talon knelt a few feet away, muscles relaxed yet coiled with restrained strength, eyes fixed on her with a patience that made her chest ache. You don't have to say more, Talon said softly, voice carrying the weight of understanding. I know. I feel it too. Evelyn's breath hitched slightly. I've never allowed myself to feel this, she admitted, eyes lowered. The world has always demanded control from me. Responsibility, desire, tenderness. It's been a stranger when I couldn't afford. Talon moved closer, each motion deliberate, respectful, yet charged with a subtle tension. It doesn't have to be a stranger anymore, he said. Not with me. You can feel whatever you need to, and I'll meet you there. Her storm gray eyes lifted, glimmering with a mixture of fear and longing. And if I falter? If I can't trust? You already have, he said quietly. By letting me see this side of you, by letting yourself feel. Trust grows bit by bit. And desire can guide us gently if we let it. The firelight danced across their faces as the distance between them shrank. Evelyn's fingers trembled slightly as she reached toward him, her hand brushing against his calloused skin. The spark that passed through them was unmistakable, charged with months of solitude and longing finally given voice. I've spent so long alone, she whispered. I never imagined someone would see me, all of me, and want me. Talon's hand cupped hers fully now, warm and grounding. I don't just want you, he said, voice low, intimate. I need to feel you to share this connection. Not just tonight, but in every way we can. Evelyn's breath hitched again, the vulnerability she'd carried for decades now mingling with a raw, undeniable longing. She leaned slightly forward, the fire casting golden highlights in her hair. Then, show me what it means to be seen, to be desired, to be wanted without shame. Talon's dark eyes softened, the intensity of his desire tempered by respect. He shifted closer, careful, deliberate, letting his presence be felt without overwhelming her. The air between them pulsed with tension, a rhythm neither had known could exist in a life shaped by survival and solitude. You're ready, he murmured. And I'll follow you as far as you'll let me. Every step. Evelyn's lips parted slightly, a tremor running through her body as she allowed herself to close the final distance. I am, she whispered. I trust you, and I want this. The fire sputtered, casting shadows that seemed to celebrate the surrender of two guarded hearts. Hands intertwined, they moved closer, the warmth of their bodies beginning to bridge the years of loneliness and restraint. Evelyn's breath mingled with Talon's as the room seemed to shrink, leaving only the two of them in a cocoon of trust, desire, and the fragile beginnings of passion. I've waited for this, Talon confessed, voice low, almost reverent. And I will not betray it. Not tonight, not ever. Evelyn's eyes glistened with tears she didn't attempt to hide. Then, stay with me, she whispered. Tonight, let me forget the world. Let me feel. All of this, all of you. He nodded, closing the last fraction of space between them. In the quiet of the cabin, with embers glowing and snow whispering against the windows, two souls that had wandered alone for so long finally surrendered to the warmth, the longing and the desire that had drawn them together. And in that night, amidst the shadows and firelight, Evelyn Harrow and Talon Rainwalker discovered not just desire, but a bond forged in trust, intimacy, and the rare courage to reveal one's heart without fear. Outside, the prairie remained cold and silent. Inside, the cabin was alive with the undeniable pulse of connection, one that would shape the rest of their lives, long after the snow had melted. The first light of dawn crept slowly across the cabin floor, painting the walls in soft amber and gold. Outside, the prairie lay silent, the snow sparkling under the pale sun. Inside, the cabin was warm, alive with the subtle remnants of the night, a night that had shifted everything between. Evelyn Harrow and Talon Rainwalker. Evelyn sat on the edge of her cot, blanket wrapped loosely around her shoulders, storm gray eyes reflecting both the firelight and the new clarity in her heart. Talon remained close, his dark gaze steady, as if he had been waiting all his life for this morning. There was no rush, no expectation, only a quiet understanding that whatever unfolded today would be built on trust, respect, and the intimacy they had earned together. I need to tell you something, Evelyn said, her voice soft but steady, carrying the weight of her heart. Something I haven't shared with anyone. Not even in thought. Not like this. Talon's eyes softened. You've already shared more than you know, he said. And I'll listen, always. Her gaze fell to her hands for a moment, then lifted, meeting his fully. All my life, I've hidden a desire. A longing. It wasn't just for companionship. It wasn't just for warmth or safety. I've longed for someone who sees me fully, who desires me, who wants all of me, not just what's convenient or safe. I didn't know if it was possible. Until now. Talon took her hand, lifting it gently to his lips. Evelyn, he murmured, I see you. Every part of you. And I've wanted you. Every part of you. Since the moment I first stepped into this cabin. You don't need to hide anymore. Her chest tightened, a mixture of relief, longing, and a quiet, almost overwhelming excitement surging through her. And you? Do you? Desire me? Fully? Without reservation? His eyes, dark and intense, held hers unflinchingly. Yes, fully, without hesitation or doubt. You are more than I imagined, more than I dreamed. And I want you, every piece of you, your strength, your fire, your vulnerability. All of it. Evelyn's lips trembled with emotion. For decades, she had feared giving herself over to desire, fearing judgment, rejection, or disappointment. Yet here was a man, steadfast and true, offering not only his body but his trust, his patience, and his unwavering presence. I've never felt like this, she admitted, her voice breaking slightly. Never trusted anyone enough to admit it, never allowed myself to be wanted like this. And yet, it feels right. It feels like home. Talon's hand brushed a loose strand of hair from her face, and for a moment, the world outside ceased to exist. The snow, the cold prairie, even the sky itself faded into insignificance compared to the warmth and truth inside this small cabin. You've never been alone with your desire, he said softly, because you've never allowed yourself someone safe enough to share it. But I am that someone. I will not hurt you, not with my body, not with my heart. If you're ready, I'll show you what it means to be seen and wanted completely. Evelyn's pulse raced. She drew in a trembling breath, letting the words settle in her chest. The vulnerability she had feared, the courage she had summoned, had led to this moment of clarity. She finally allowed herself to nod, a single resolute gesture. I'm ready. Show me. Talon leaned closer, his presence a perfect balance of strength and tenderness. They moved together carefully, each gesture deliberate, each breath shared, as the cabin filled with a quiet intimacy that was both emotional and physical. For Evelyn, it was liberation, a release of decades of fear, restraint, and hidden longing. For Talon, it was fulfillment, the rare joy of holding someone's heart and desire as delicately as he held their bodies together. Hours passed unmeasured, marked only by the rhythm of their shared breaths, the flicker of the fire, and the soft whisper of snow against the windows. By the time the morning sun rose fully, they sat together, exhausted but fully present. Hands entwined, bodies warm, hearts open. Evelyn rested her head against Talon's shoulder, finally allowing herself to smile without fear. I never imagined this could be real, she whispered. It is, he said, pressing a gentle kiss to her hair. And it's only the beginning. Outside, the prairie remained vast and indifferent, but inside the cabin, two souls had discovered the rarest of treasures, trust, desire, and love that had been patiently waiting for the courage to reveal itself. Evelyn, Harrow had found someone who could see her completely, and Talon Rainwalker had found someone worth every step of the journey. In the quiet warmth of the cabin, with snow drifting silently beyond the windows, the story of longing, trust, and desire had reached its full, beautiful resolution. And for the first time in her life, Evelyn allowed herself to truly believe that being wanted, seen, and loved fully was not a dream. It was her reality, shared with a man who had waited for nothing but her truth.